Hello, my name is Francis Zariel Arnaiz from Opto 2, and in this video I will be discussing the anatomy and the physiology of the human eye. Before we go any further, we need to understand that the eye is a sensory organ. It collects light from our surroundings and turns it into nerve impulses. These impulses are sent by the optic nerve to the brain, which produces an image, thereby providing sight. Now that we know the basics, I will start discussing the different parts of the eye and their functions. So we'll start off with conjunctiva, for this part. Conjunctiva. Here are the little eyelashes as well. And the conjunctiva is a tissue that lines the inside of our eyelids and covers the sclera, which will be discussed later as we go along. The conjunctiva of the eye provides protection and lubrication of the eye by producing mucus and tears. Next, we have the extraocular muscles, or this part. There are 6 extraocular muscles, namely superior rectus, inferior rectus, lateral rectus, medial rectus, superior oblique, and inferior oblique. These muscles originate in the eye socket and work to move the eye up, down, side to side, and rotate the eye. Here we have the lateral rectus muscle, which moves the eye outwards, and this is the medial rectus muscle, which moves the eye inwards. Now we'll move on to the sclera, or this part. Sclera. The sclera is the white outer wall of our eye. The tendons of the 6 extraocular muscles are actually attached to the sclera. The sclera is a strong layer made of collagen fibers, which helps maintain the shape of our eyeball and protect it from any injury. So the sclera is actually continuous with what is called the cornea. And the junction between the white sclera and the clear cornea is called the limbus. The cornea, or this part, is the front clear part of the eye and the front center part of the outer wall of the eye. It is made up of collagen fibers in a very special arrangement so that the cornea is clear or transparent. Through the cornea, you can see the iris and the pupil, which will be further discussed later. The function of cornea is to bend light that comes into the eye so that it is focused on the retina. Next, we have the anterior chamber, or this blue part. Anterior chamber. The anterior chamber is a fluid-filled space inside the eye. The fluid inside the anterior chamber is known as the aqueous humor. Aqueous humor provides nutrients to the cornea and the lens. The cornea lies in front of the anterior chamber, and the iris and the pupil are behind it. Next, we have the iris, which is the colored part of the eye, or this brown region. This one. The iris is shaped like a disc with a hole in the middle known as the pupil, or this one. The pupil. The muscles in the iris cause the pupil to constrict in bright light and to dilate in dim light. The change in pupil size regulates the amount of light that reaches the posterior part of the eye. Behind the iris is the posterior chamber, or this part. which is also filled with aqueous humor and is produced by a structure alongside the lens called the ciliary body. Here, this part. Ciliary body. The ciliary body is attached to the outer edge of the iris near the wall of the eye. The ciliary body produces the aqueous humor that fills the eye and nourishes its structures. It also has the ciliary muscle. Which helps to change the shape of the lens when accommodation occurs. Next is the lens, or this part. The lens is also known as the crystalline lens, and the lens is located directly behind the pupil. Just like cornea, the lens is also a refractive media that bends light coming into the eye to help focus it on the retina. It changes shape to help the eye focus to see objects clearly at near. The lens is suspended from a wall of the eye by many small fibers called suspensory ligaments, or this part. Also this part. Suspensory ligaments is also known as zonules of Zinn, and these are structures that help to maintain the position of the lens in the optical path, and anchor muscles that change the shape of the lens to alter focus. Now we'll move on to choroid, or this yellowish layer. This is the choroid. The choroid is a tissue layer that lies between the retina and the sclera. The choroid has a rich supply of blood vessels that nourishes the retina. The retina, on the other hand, or the red layer, this layer, is a thin, transparent structure that covers the inner wall of the eye. The purpose of the retina is to receive light that the lens has focused, convert the light into neural signals, and send these signals onto the brain for visual recognition. Next is the vitreous chamber, or sometimes called the vitreous cavity. It lies between the lens and the retina, and it fills 4/5 of the space inside the back part of the eye. A jelly-like substance known as the vitreous humor fills the cavity, and this part plays an important role in nourishing the inner structures of the eye. When light comes into the eye through the pupil, it passes through the vitreous chamber to be projected onto the retina. Now this part is the ora serrata. The ora serrata is the serrated junction between the retina and the ciliary body. This junction marks the transition from the simple non-photosensitive area of the retina to the complex multi-layered photosensitive region. Now we'll move on to this side where the macula is found. The macula, or macula lutea, is part of the retina at the back of the eye that produces even sharper vision with its rods and cones. The fovea, or fovea centralis, is the pit inside the macula with only cones, so vision can be at its sharpest. On to the last part, we have the optic disc and the optic nerve. The optic disc is a circular area in the back of the inside of the eye, whereas the optic nerve connects each eye to the brain. The optic nerve is a structure that sends the image seen by the eye to the brain so that the images can be processed. And that is it for anatomy and physiology of the eye. I hope you learned something.